when you go through and you change the wording to be very specific to that audience, it stands out among the crowd because you can't niche a pitch without really personalizing it. It won't be niched if you don't. Hey there, pitches. Welcome to the Go Pitch Yourself podcast with me, Angie Trueblood, a self-proclaimed podcast junkie. I'm on a mission to rid the world of the crappy pitches that are filling up inboxes everywhere. Want to help? Then let's get pitching. Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Go Pitch Yourself. I am excited to be bringing one of my favorite topics to the podcast, the idea of niching a pitch, what I like to call niche that pitch, because I feel like it just flows nicely when you say it that way. It can't really be niche that pitch. It just doesn't flow as well. So we're going to dig into that in a moment, but I'm actually coming off of a training that I did in one of my clients' paid membership community. Nikki Roush, who is the Sales Maven, invited me into her membership, the Sales Maven Society, to do a training on podcast pitching because a lot of her members had been asking about it. And one thing that was really highlighted in there is the impact that some of the opportunities that she has earned as a result of myself and my team pitching her were really pretty mind-blowing for some of the folks, I think, in that group. And I thought it would be really important to share with you all because we talk about podcast pitching and really, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Pitching is not what I do. My goal actually is to gain opportunities for my clients that we are able to convert into business growth of some sort. So for Nikki, she shared a little bit about an interview that I was able to help her secure and the impact that it has had on her and actually the podcast host post recording going live. So Nikki shared with us that on a particular podcast that she recorded, afterwards, the host and her have both coached the other in various instances. So they are kind of coaching each other in their own zone of genius back and forth, which is amazing. It's such a great collaboration to come out of an interview. And even more than that, Nikki has been invited into this host, she's a business coach, into her community to train some of her community members. So a lot of times we think, oh, we're going to land these podcasts and the audience is going to fall in love with us and they're going to come back and buy our program or they're going to hire us to do work for them one-on-one. And while, yes, that absolutely can happen, there are a lot of other opportunities that can exist as a result of meeting someone else that works in a business that's complementary to your own. There are endless opportunities for collaboration. Even just a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to a friend of mine who I had pitched for actually probably a year and a half ago. And she shared with me that one of the opportunities we were able to secure for her resulted in her writing an actual chapter in the host's published book, which is amazing. So as you're considering if you pitching yourself for podcast opportunities makes sense, I would love for you to flip the script on that a little bit and think about, well, let's not focus so much on the pitching, but let's focus on what might actually happen once I get an interview on someone's podcast and it goes live and I form a relationship with that host. How can I bring value to them in a different way other than a podcast recording? And how might they be able to bring value to my own audience? So make sure you're thinking big when you start to think about the opportunities that might be waiting for you as you start to pitch yourself more regularly. Okay, now we're going to dig into today's content, which is niche that pitch. I will say, however, stick around until the end of the episode because I have a special offer for the Go Pitch Yourself program if you are interested in learning how to do that. And I'll share that at the end of the episode. It's super timely. It actually only lasts for a couple of days. So stick around, or if you don't have time to stick around, fast forward now to the end of the episode to grab it. All right, so niching that pitch. We hear a lot about the concept of niche as we start to grow our businesses and scale our businesses. And I think even in the beginning of my business, I think I struggled with exactly what my niche would be. And Would I niche the services that I offered? Or would I niche the type of person that I would be working with? And I'll be quite candid with you, as much as I know the riches are in the niches. At the beginning of business, the riches are in actually getting clients that will pay you. And so sometimes being particularly particular about who that is and what service that is and how you work with them isn't going to actually make you rich in the beginning. So I think a lot of us start our businesses and we have some pretty wide open ideas of what we offer. And I actually think that's fine because you don't know what you don't know. I really think of your business can evolve over time. When I first launched my business, the pitching part of it, I wasn't just pitching for podcasts. I was pitching for speaking opportunities, written media, blog posts, you name it. If it was a visibility opportunity, I was trying to get my clients to secure those. So eventually I evolved. I saw what I really loved to do. I was able to gather enough data to see where I was the most successful. And at that point is when I started to niche down a bit. So, what I'm saying now is yes, obviously consider if you're offering everything under the sun as you're starting, you may want to dial it back a bit. But it's okay in the beginning of business to try out a couple of different services or client types until you're able to say with some confidence that what you are selling is actually a sellable product or service, and that the people that you want to work with will actually buy that product or service from you. But the cool thing about appearing on podcasts is that you can practice some of that niching without having to scale your business down and to narrow it down into something that we often think of as being very narrow. I always think when I consider the idea of niching, I always think it being super specific and super narrow. But the beauty is that you can pitch in a way that is niche to particular verticals or to particular types of audiences and really get a feel for whether or not your message and your offering resonates with them. So it's definitely a great little playground opportunity for you to dig into. So I wanted to talk about this a little bit more. And I'll be using some examples just so that it can really illustrate and bring to life what that means, the whole idea of niching a pitch. But I actually niche the type of shows that I pitch myself to. And they happen to be people and types of businesses that I love to work with, and also ones that I know I can get a return on their investment with myself and my team. The first, I work a lot with service providers. So I will often pitch topics that are within my wheelhouse of expertise to podcast hosts that serve audiences of service providers. I love working with them. I feel like they are a very underrepresented part of the podcast guest circuit, if you will. A lot of times, service providers were so busy doing the work that we don't lift our head up and think about marketing and putting ourselves out there as the expert. And so it's a really fun group of folks for me to work with. And also, they're really hard workers. And I love that. So, service providers are one of the niches that I kind of pitch myself to. Also, speakers. So, folks that are thinking about digging into public speaking and that are really interested in growing that part of their business often already recognize the value that being on podcasts can have. So for me, there's a pretty low barrier there for me to educate them or kind of convince them that being a featured guest on podcasts is a good use of their time. And then a third type of niche, if you want to think of it that way, is really in the podcasting space. So recently, I've been reaching out to folks who serve podcasters, folks that want to start a podcast or want to grow their podcast. I love talking on shows that talk to podcasters because, again, podcasters know the value in being a guest on other people's show, but they also really appreciate the ability to communicate via podcast. So often they're great guests because they've had so much experience honing their expertise. And so often it results in some really great interviews. Those are examples of the type of niches. And I really want to say niche here, but I feel like since the title is Niche That Pitch, I have to really go all in on the niche pronunciation. So I'm going to do that. I just want you to know that every time I say it standalone, I'm thinking niche. Okay. Okay. All right. So, why is it important for us to consider niching our pitch. The first is a lot of times when you pitch to shows that have specific topics rather than just a general business type show or a general podcast geared towards moms and families, their audience is super engaged because they know week after week they're showing up for content that is within a certain realm or within a certain category. And so, most likely, week after week, that content is going to be relevant to them. Similar to my show. I mean, we're a pretty niched podcast, right? We're talking a lot about using podcast guesting as a marketing and visibility strategy. If you're not interested in being a guest on podcast, likely you're not going to keep showing up here. But if you continue to show up here, it's because you know you get value here week after week. So I love the idea of pitching myself to more specific shows because often their audiences will convert a lot better because they're already really engaged in who that host is. Secondly, it's really fun. It allows for you to play around with different types of businesses that you might not get exposure to otherwise. So, a lot of times, like in the business space, we're so, I think, used to seeing podcasts about general business topics that we don't look at podcasts that are in more specific types of business categories. So I've had a couple of clients recently who we will pitch into this niche of photography business podcasts. The beauty of that is that they've definitely worked with photographers before, so they have expertise in that space. But if it was new to you, right? So if I had never worked with service providers before, but I knew that it was an offering that I really wanted to explore, it gives you a chance to get in front of those audiences, see what topics might resonate with them. If some of them come back to you and want to work with you, it gives you some experience kind of working with them to see if it's an area that you might want to dig into a little bit more deeply. The other side and the other benefit is really just an efficiency perspective. So, I'm all about using pitch templates as a starting point. Well, the beauty is if you can pitch to a couple of verticals at one time. So, like speaking, if I found 5 podcasts that talked really to folks that are looking to up their public speaking game, I don't need to change that pitch around too much. The bones of it will be the same. I just need to personalize it to that host and that specific audience. So it can be a really efficient way to get some pitches cranked out without feeling like you have to do a ton of new research with every podcast pitch that you're putting out. The other piece of it is really from an acceptances perspective. Likely the folks that are pitching to niches are doing that with topics that aren't very specific. So let's take the photography podcast, for example, right? The photography business podcast. There's probably not a lot of folks that are actually experts in financial services for photography businesses. Now, there may be, and if there are, they absolutely are pitching photography business podcasts. But in the off chance that there's not, if you can edit your pitch to be really relevant to photographers, then you're going to stand above the crowd because you took the time to come up with a topic that was specific and relevant to them rather than just have some financial expert come on and regurgitate the same type of financial pitch that they're sending out to any type of business. So it just really allows you to stand out from the crowd if you do your homework in really specializing and narrowing down that pitch that you send to them. Finally, you're able to stand out a lot more in shows that are niched into certain audiences because, again, there's not a ton of financial people coming on a photography business podcast. So, if you're the only one coming on and the only one that's talking about financials, you can bet your bottom dollar that when that audience member has a financial question, they're likely going to reach out to my client, Danielle Hayden, to get her perspective, possibly hire her agency or get her profit planner book. But because she's likely the only one pitching her type of service and her type of expertise, you really can stand out a lot more. So for me and the podcast pitching space, there's not a lot of people out there talking to service providers either about why they should be pitching themselves or why they should be offering podcast pitching as a service to their clients. So when I go on those shows, I stand out, one, because often they haven't heard a conversation about that within their specific niche. And then, secondly, down the line, when they start thinking that they're ready to pitch themselves, I'm the person they're going to turn to because I'll probably still be one of the only people that's come on that show to talk about podcast pitching. So the beauty is that you really stand out from the crowd because you are able to be more of the focused expert within that show. Okay, this is great, Angie, but how the heck do we do that? Especially if our business is not super niche, how do we actually niche that pitch? So, the first step is identifying a couple of subsets of either clients or students that you really enjoy working with. If there is a type of student or client that you don't love working with, I definitely don't encourage you to dig deep and try to get on a lot of shows within that niche because the folks that are going to come back to you are going to be the people within that specialty that you don't necessarily love working with. So for me, again, service providers, I love working with them. So I totally will use those folks and those types of podcasts as one of the verticals or one of the niches that I will pitch myself to. Secondly, you don't want to just identify who you like to work with. You want to identify the types of clients and the type of students that you've actually been able to help obtain the most success with, right? So, if I had worked with service providers before and gotten absolutely no results for them, I'm not going to keep pitching myself to podcasts that they listen to because I really want to provide exceptional value for the clients that come to us. So when you can find clients that you love to work with and that you also find that you're able to really help and have great success with, it's really your sweet spot. And I would say double down on that, especially in the pitches. A great example is Nikki Rausch. So we pitched her to some photography shows again because I had found this niche for some of my people who their services are not as creative, but business owners in the creative space need financial support from Danielle. They need sales support from Nikki. Nikki loves working with photographers, and often they really need her help because they're in the creative space. They don't necessarily love selling or feel super comfortable with it. So, after working with Nikki for a little bit, they're able to see really big gains in their business. So, that vertical has been spot on for her. Okay, so now you've been able to identify the types of folks that you like to work with and the types of folks that you're able to get great results for. Then, how do you actually edit your pitch to line up with that vertical or with that niche? So, you take the talk topics that you've already established. Likely, you have several that really showcase your expertise and can bring some really significant value to the types of audiences that you want to show up in front of. Well, then you need to just tweak it a bit to serve that audience of, for instance, photographers. So you don't need to rework the entire pitch, but you really do need to double down and explain why you, as a sales expert, is someone that would be relevant for a photography business podcast. And it can be a really direct explanation of Nikki really enjoys working with photographers and has lots of experience helping them with their sales game. I wouldn't say it like that, but you could put a sentence in there to really bridge that gap. And then as you're pitching the actual topic, put that niche within the topic. So, how photographers can close higher end packages. And also, even that conversation around higher end packages, you need to have a little bit of insight into that industry to know that photographers are looking, when they're looking to scale and grow their business, it makes sense for them to have more high end packages. So they're not selling a ton of smaller priced to a million different people. So, first, you can just start to shift some of the language to be really specific to that particular niche. To me, with the service provider pitch, I go into when I explain some of my bulleted takeaways or some of the bulleted talking points that we could chat about. I include in there why service providers aren't pitching themselves an explanation of why there is a need for service providers on business focused podcasts, for instance. So you really want to go through your more general pitch and put it under the umbrella of whatever this vertical is. So if you're Kendra Hennessy, owner of Mother Like a Boss, and your focus is homemaking, but maybe you want to narrow that down into work at home moms. Well, you could take a general pitch that you have for homemaking, for instance, but cater that to, well, what are the needs of work at home moms? Are they different than working outside of the home moms? Yeah, absolutely. So you don't need to rewrite the entire pitch, but you just need to make sure that the angle that you're coming at that with is really specific to the people that you'll be talking to. And a lot of that is just acknowledging that work from home moms, right? And you could easily put some bulleted discussion points in that pitch. Something in there about when you don't have a clear distinction between work and home in your physical space, how do you maintain it? And I think one that Kendra and I had talked about was, how do you set boundaries when there's no huge distinction in the physical space between work at home? So we're able to go into that sort of silo of work at home mom podcasts and take a topic that we've used before, but just make it really relevant to them. So that's the niching that pitch concept. I highly encourage you do that if you haven't before. Also, when you go through and you change the wording that much to be very specific to that audience, it stands out among the crowd because you can't niche a pitch without really personalizing it. It won't be niched if you don't. So it's kind of a win win. It forces you to do your homework and to really dig in, and your pitch will stand out if you follow the guidelines we've gone over. Okay. I would love to hear what you are doing to niche your pitch. So, as always, I am on Instagram and I love it. But if you would tag me in a story and let me know what your niched pitch is, who's the vertical that's a little bit more specific, maybe, than the clients that you normally work with, or when you first started thinking about podcast pitching, maybe you thought you would talk about Facebook ads. Okay, well, let's dial that down. I would love to hear you share, what would a topic discussion around Facebook ads for a specific group of listeners sound like? So tag me on Instagram and I will reshare that, because my goal is to have you getting exposed to as many people that might be looking for you to show up on a podcast as possible. And so if I can reshare your story, then I absolutely will. So let's see who is able to show me how they are niching that pitch. Now, I promised at the beginning that I would share a little bit of information, secret info about the Go Pitch Yourself program. So we are almost finished the first round of it. So we launched in January and we are wrapping up, I think it'll be week 8 by the time this episode comes out. Well, I am doing an early enrollment. We're going to reopen the program in mid-April, but I'm doing a very short early enrollment sprint starting March 10th, the day this comes out. The program will be open until March 13th, so that's only a few days. Now, the benefits of early enrolling: one, you get a bit of a discount. So you actually get $100 off what the program is going to launch at in April. You also get access to all of the content from the get-go. So the content is loaded in our Member Vault platform, and it is ready and waiting for you to come in, listen to it, interact, do the legwork, and then get to pitching. So you basically get early access to the content. The community portion of the program will still open in April, but I've added in 2 bonus opportunities to connect in a group setting. So while we will not have a Facebook community opening until the official launch in April, I do have 2 group Zoom calls already scheduled for anyone that enrolls during that early enrollment period. So if you want to check out Go Pitch Yourself, definitely snag the link in the show notes, or you can go to angietrueblood.com/program, and the link to get to the Member Vault landing page is right there. So definitely go check it out. It will have the early enrollment price tag on it. And again, it's a really short window. So midnight, March 13th, Eastern Standard Time, this opportunity to enroll early turns off, and then you'll have to wait until mid-April with everyone else to enroll. But I can't wait to see who shows up, the success that the people in this program, so we've got 21 folks in the program now, People are getting accepted. We have a couple folks who have a 50% acceptance rate on the pitches they've sent, and I don't even think they've gotten to the follow-up stage yet. So it's such great energy in the group, and I just can't wait to see what it evolves into as more and more people enroll. So that's it for Go Pitch Yourself. And I can't wait to circle back with you guys. I have another guest episode coming up. I think it's going to be a really great one for you as we kind of dig into more behind the scenes of the podcasting world. So I will chat with you soon, and I cannot wait to see you tagging me on Instagram with niching that pitch. Have a good one, guys. Alrighty, pitches. Thank you for listening to the podcast. Now it's time for you to get out there and go pitch yourself. Want a team of cheerleaders rooting you on while you do? Then pop on over and join our free Facebook community, Go Pitch Yourself. It's full of entrepreneurs just like you who are stepping up, being seen, and supporting each other along the way. Don't forget to head on over to the website for show notes, downloads, and links to any resources we mentioned in this episode. The website is angietrueblood.com/podcast. Happy pitching!